At my birthday party, my brother organized a game of Never Have I Ever. The winner would get to ask him for one favor, no strings attached. Everyone at the party knew that I had been brought back to the Stone family 3 years ago, but I still hadn't been officially recognized or allowed to move into the main estate. They all purposefully let me win, whispering that my brother was finally giving me a chance to come home. Only the fake heiress, Wendy, fought me at every turn. My brother gives me $50,000 a month for allowance. He bid $1 million on a diamond necklace just for me. I get to spend every holiday with the family front and center. My name is officially written in the Stone family registry. After her 4 sentences, I only had one finger left up. She smiled sweetly and delivered the final blow. My brother organized this entire game tonight, just to make me happy. My heart hollowed out. I looked at my brother. He was smiling at her with absolute adoration. Just like every single time over the last 3 years, he chose her side. I admitted defeat and put down my last finger. Suddenly, I realized I didn't really want to go home anymore. A bizarre, heavy silence fell over the private room. Everyone's eyes landed on me, waiting to see how I would react. I simply smiled, picked up my shot glass, and downed the liquor in one go. I lose. Someone couldn't handle the awkwardness and tried to smooth things over. Actually, didn't Wendy break the rules? Who brings up family drama in a drinking game? Wendy raised an eyebrow and shot the girl a glare. Why not? Isn't this how the game is played? She turned to my brother, her voice dripping with sugar. Vance, did I break the rules? My brother's eyes crinkled in helpless affection. You win. I set this game up to cheer you up anyway. What do you want? Name it. Wendy shot me a provocative look. Then you have to take me shopping tomorrow. I want a new dress and you have the best taste. I set my empty glass down on the marble table. I lowered my head, expertly avoiding Wendy's arrogant stare. I had been practicing this exact act of yielding for 3 years. I was fluent in it. It was so natural that even my brother didn't notice anything wrong with my mood. He frowned slightly, looking a bit conflicted. But I promised Maya I'd help her move tomorrow. My chest tightened. For the 3 years since I was brought back to the city, I had been living in a small apartment in the suburbs, miles away from the Stone estate. Last month, my brother asked me what I wanted for my birthday. I told him I wanted to be officially recognized. I wanted my name in the family registry. He had patted my head with a sigh. Pick something else. You know, Wendy is really sensitive about that. I've been trying my best to talk her into it. Once she agrees, you can come home. I had lowered my eyes, taking a step back as always. Then can I at least move closer to the estate? Where I am now is too far. It's inconvenient to go anywhere. He had frowned, not agreeing immediately, only saying he would think about it. I knew the truth. He had to go ask Wendy for permission. This little princess had stolen my life and grown up surrounded by their unconditional love. Even my own mother walked on eggshells around her, terrified of making her upset. Sure enough, yesterday my brother told me Wendy had approved the move. He had already found me an apartment downtown. Once my birthday passed, I could move in. I had been overjoyed, begging him to come help me. He had promised. The dim, shifting lights of the private club washed over Wendy's face. She scowled. Why does she have to move tomorrow? Can't she do it the day after? Or next week? Seeing her get upset, my brother immediately softened. There's no rush to buy a dress, right? We can go any other day. I want to go tomorrow. That dress is limited edition, and it's going to sell out. Wendy raised her voice, making the atmosphere in the room even more unbearable. With so many people watching, my brother's face darkened slightly. A moment later, his lips parted. He was just about to say something. But I spoke first. You guys go shopping tomorrow. I'm not moving anymore. Where I live right now is fine. The moment the words left my mouth, my brother snapped his head toward me in absolute shock. My brother knew exactly how desperately I wanted to move downtown. How much I wanted to be closer to the family. So when he saw me actively stepping aside to defuse the situation, a flicker of guilt and heartache crossed his eyes. Let's play another round, he suggested, looking directly at me. Maya goes first this time. I didn't say anything for a long moment. The girl sitting next to me nudged my arm. Come on, hurry up. Your brother is throwing you a bone. You'll definitely win this round. I raised my hand, all 5 fingers up, and looked dead at Wendy. I have seen the sun rise deep in the mountains at 4 a.m. The crowd immediately played along, groaning in exaggerated defeat. Wendy rolled her eyes and put down a finger. Then she couldn't wait to speak. I have seen the northern lights in Iceland with the whole family. My expression didn't change as I folded a finger down. I spoke slowly. I have raised a 300-pound pig. She scrunched her nose in absolute disgust. I own a registered star in the sky. Mom bought it for my birthday. I lowered my eyelashes, my voice entirely flat. I have arranged and managed my adoptive parents' funerals completely alone. She froze for a second, then gritted her teeth. I attended high society charity galas representing the entire Stone family, when I was 18. The entire room fell dead silent. At some point, the game had become a duel between just the two of us. I didn't back down. I held up my last 2 fingers, my voice completely devoid of emotion. At my lowest weight, I was 70 pounds. Wendy refused to show weakness, pushing harder. I have 20 million in my bank account and 3 oceanfront villas. If she was pulling out numbers like that, it meant she was out of real ammunition to show off. I gently curled the corners of my mouth into a smile. I don't have a home. She folded her last finger. She opened her mouth, trying to find another comeback. Then she realized she had already lost. Her face turned an ugly shade of red. Just as she angrily reached for her shot glass, my brother grabbed her wrist. "I'll drink this for you." He downed the liquor in one smooth motion. Then, his face completely dark, he stormed over, grabbed my arm, and dragged me out into the hallway. "Why did you say those things? Are you trying to play the victim? I know you suffered in the countryside, but tonight wasn't the time to fish for sympathy." My heart plummeted into a bottomless pit. I wasn't sure if it was the alcohol hitting my system or just an overwhelming, suffocating sense of injustice. Whatever it was, the dam holding back 3 years of suppressed emotions finally broke. Wendy can flaunt her perfect life, but when I talk about my own life, I'm playing the victim? Could you possibly be any more biased? My brother's face turned to thunder. "She doesn't know any better. Are you saying you don't know better either? I actually thought you were being understanding earlier. I was going to make sure you move tomorrow no matter what. And then you pull a stunt like this. Maya, have I let you starve these last 3 years? Have I not given you enough money? What exactly are you in such a rush for?" My pupils constricted. I stared at him in utter disbelief. "So you think the reason I'm desperate to come home is for your money?" My brother found me the year my adoptive parents died. I had violently lost everything. I had pushed through the physical exhaustion and heartbreak to handle their funerals all by myself. At my absolute lowest, most helpless moment, he descended like a god from above. With bloodshot eyes, he told me that I was the biological daughter of the Stone family. "Maya, come back with me. Mom and Dad are waiting for you. It's too hard here. How have you survived all these years?" I weighed 70 pounds at the time. My severely malnourished body disappeared into his embrace. His hands shook uncontrollably. His voice was raw. "I'm so sorry. I'm late. I let you suffer so much." I had stood frozen, not knowing what to do with my hands. He was so tall, so elegant. I felt like my dirt and poverty were staining his expensive coat just by him hugging me. I was incredibly insecure, but I couldn't stop the overwhelming surge of emotion that came from finding my real blood. So, I viewed him as my ultimate salvation, and I followed him back to the city. But he didn't take me home. He put me in a small apartment on the outskirts of the city. "Actually, our family has another daughter. She really doesn't want you to come back. She's been screaming and crying, threatening to jump off the roof. Maya, just give it a little time. Let me talk her down." To keep me calm, he brought our mother to see me. The moment the elegant, aristocratic woman laid eyes on me, she burst into tears. "Maya, look how big you've gotten. Mommy is so sorry." Just like my brother, she pulled me into a tight hug, her voice breaking with heartache. "Just wait a little longer. Mommy will make Wendy understand." I hugged her back, terrified of breaking the moment. "Okay, I'll wait." She patted my head with relief and pulled a black credit card from her designer bag. "You can spend whatever you want on this card. Even though you can't come home yet, you get the exact same treatment as Wendy." I pushed the card back in panic, feeling unworthy, but she forcefully shoved it into my pocket. "All right, Mommy has to go. If I stay out too long, Wendy will get suspicious. Next time I come, we'll have dinner together, okay?" I nodded my head furiously. "Okay, thank you, Mom." Who knew that wait a little longer would turn into 3 years? In those 3 years, whenever I cautiously brought up going home, my brother would just sigh. "Let's talk about it in a few days." In the beginning, his tone was gentle, but as time went on, and he realized I was a pushover who wouldn't throw explosive tantrums like Wendy, he grew annoyed. "You have everything you need right now. Why are you in such a rush to move in? Do you have any idea how much pressure I'm under just sneaking out to see you? We can barely hide it from Wendy anymore." I couldn't understand it. Why do I need her permission to return to my own house? Mom sneaks around just to see me. Am I even a daughter of the Stone family? His face had darkened instantly. "You are my biological sister. Of course you're a Stone. But we love Wendy too. Are we supposed to just watch her jump off a building?" I fell silent. Seeing me upset, he had helplessly grabbed my hand. "Don't worry, you'll come home eventually. Once Wendy softens up, I'll arrange for you two to meet. Try to become friends with her. Once you have a good relationship, she'll naturally accept you." I had never imagined that the road back to my own family would be littered with so many insurmountable walls. That was the first time since arriving in the city that I truly missed my adoptive parents. And now, any lingering hope I had of returning to the Stone family had completely shattered. My question hung in the damp, cigarette-scented air of the hallway. Vance's face underwent a rapid series of transformations. First shock, then a brief flash of vulnerability, before his features hardened back into the familiar, defensive mask of an older brother who believed he was the only reasonable person in the room. "Don't put words in my mouth, Maya," he said, his voice dropping to a harsh, controlled whisper. He glanced back at the heavy wooden door of the private room, clearly terrified that someone might walk out and witness this undignified scene. "You know exactly what I mean. We've given you everything. A place to live, a generous allowance, clothes, safety. But it's never enough, is it? You always have to push for more, always choosing the worst possible moments to make us look like monsters." I looked at him, really looked at him. For 3 years, I had viewed this man through a lens of profound gratitude. I had remembered him as the savior who found me in the mud of my adoptive parents' village, the one who held me while I wept, promising that my days of suffering were over. I had spent 36 months trying to earn his approval, carefully measuring my words, swallowing my pride, and accepting whatever scraps of affection he threw my way. But standing under the harsh, buzzing fluorescent lights of the corridor, the illusion shattered. He wasn't a savior. He was just a cowardly man who wanted the moral satisfaction of having rescued his biological sister without having to pay the social or emotional cost of actually integrating her into his life. "You're right," I said quietly. Vance blinked, thrown off by my sudden lack of resistance. "What?" "You're right," I repeated, my voice steady, devoid of the desperate, trembling cadence that usually defined my interactions with him. "You have given me a lot of things, and I've spent 3 years feeling like a beggar who should be grateful for every crumb." I reached into my small, worn handbag. It was a cheap synthetic leather purse I had bought for $10 at a suburban market, a stark contrast to the designer bags Wendy collected like toys. I rummaged through the pocket and pulled out the sleek, heavy black credit card my mother had pushed into my hands 3 years ago. I held it out to him. Vance frowned, staring at the card as if it were a foreign object. "What is this? What are you doing?" "I haven't spent a single penny of it," I said. "Don't lie to me, Maya. Mom checked the accounts." "She checks the account Wendy uses," I interrupted softly. "If she had ever bothered to look at this one, she would have seen the balance has remained exactly the same since the day she gave it to me. I kept it because I thought it was a symbol of her love, a promise that one day I would be allowed to be her daughter in the light, not just in the dark." I took his hand, pried his fingers open, and pressed the cold plastic into his palm. "I don't want it anymore," I said. "And I don't want the downtown apartment either. You can tell Wendy she doesn't have to worry about me moving closer. I'm staying exactly where I am." Vance's hand clenched around the card. His jaw tightened, a muscle leaping in his cheek. He was angry now, but beneath the anger, I saw a flicker of genuine panic. He wasn't used to me refusing him. He was used to me crying, apologizing, and begging for another chance to prove my worth. "Maya, stop being dramatic," he hissed, taking a step toward me. "You're drunk. You're upset because of the game. Let's just go back inside, apologize to Wendy, and we can discuss the move tomorrow." "I'm not drunk, Vance," I said, stepping backward, easily evading his reach. "I've never been clearer in my life. Good night." I turned around and walked toward the exit. Maya, get back here." His voice echoed down the long hall, filled with authority and irritation, but for the first time in 3 years, I didn't stop. I kept walking, past the polished marble floors, past the security guards who looked at me with polite curiosity, and out into the cool, damp night air. It was raining, a soft, gray drizzle that blurred the neon lights of the city. I didn't call a chauffeur. I didn't open any ride-sharing apps. I simply walked to the nearest bus stop, sat down on the cold metal bench, and waited. As the rain pattered against the glass roof of the shelter, I felt a strange, light sensation in my chest. It felt like the beginning of a long-delayed breath. The next morning, the rain had cleared, leaving the city washed in a pale, sterile sunlight. My phone had been vibrating on the bedside table since 7 a.m. I didn't need to look at it to know who was calling. There would be missed calls from Vance, perhaps a few frantic texts from our mother, and maybe a passive-aggressive message from Wendy masquerading as concern. I ignored it all. I dragged my old, battered suitcase out from under the bed. It was the same suitcase I had used when I left the countryside 3 years ago, scuffed, one of the wheels broken, held together by a cheap nylon strap. When I first arrived in the city, Vance had tried to throw it away, calling it an eyesore. I had fought him to keep it, claiming it was the only thing I had left of my adoptive parents. In reality, I had kept it because deep down some instinct had warned me that I might need to pack up and leave at a moment's notice. I began to systematically empty my wardrobe, I didn't have many clothes. Most of them were simple, practical garments I had bought myself with the meager income one earned from translating documents online, a remote job I had taken to keep myself occupied in the lonely suburban apartment. I left behind the expensive dresses Vance had occasionally bought for me, the ones he insisted I wear whenever he took me out for a quick, secretive dinner at some out-of-the-way restaurant where no one from high society would recognize us. I left them hanging in the closet, pristine and useless, like the skin of a life I no longer wished to inhabit. Around 10:30 a.m. the doorbell rang. I paused, a pair of folded jeans in my hands. The ringing was loud, insistent, and familiar. I walked over to the door and checked the peephole. Vance was standing in the narrow, dimly lit hallway of the apartment building. He looked tired. His hair, usually styled back, was slightly disheveled, and his expensive designer suit looked a bit rumpled. I unlocked the deadbolt and pulled the door open, but I didn't step back to let him in. I stood in the threshold, framing the doorway. Vance's eyes immediately swept over me, then flicked past my shoulder into the living room, where the half-packed suitcase sat on the floor. His brow furrowed. "What is this?" he asked, his voice tight. "Are you throwing a tantrum now, Maya? I told you I was going to help you move today, but Wendy." "I told you yesterday, Vance," I said, my voice quiet and calm. "I'm not moving to the downtown apartment." "So you're just going to stay here and pout?" He stepped forward, expecting me to yield and let him enter, but I didn't budge. He stopped, his expression turning to one of sheer disbelief. "You're seriously locking me out?" "I'm not pouting. I'm moving out of this apartment entirely," I said. "I've already contacted the landlord. I'm terminating the lease. I'll be gone by the end of the week." Vance stared at me, his mouth slightly open. "Are you insane? Where are you going to go? Back to the countryside? To that dilapidated shack?" "That dilapidated shack was a home," I said, feeling a dull ache in my chest at the memory of my adoptive parents. "But no, I'm not going back there. I'm staying in the city. I found a small place of my own." "With what money?" Vance scoffed, his panic morphing back into defensive arrogance. "You returned the card. You don't have a job that can support a lifestyle in the city, Maya. Don't be ridiculous. Stop this nonsense, pack your things, and let me drive you to the downtown place. I already paid the deposit, and Wendy agreed to let you have it. She even said she might come by to help you decorate." The utter lack of self-awareness in his voice was almost comical. He truly believed that Wendy agreeing to let me live in an apartment he paid for was a grand act of charity that I should be weeping with gratitude for. "I don't need Wendy's permission to live my life," I said. "And I don't want your money, Vance. I have my own savings from my translation work. It's enough for a small room. I don't need a high-rise downtown. A small room." Vance's voice rose, a mix of anger and genuine embarrassment. "You're a daughter of the Stone family. If people find out you're living in some slum, do you have any idea what that will do to our family's reputation? What will Mom say? What will Dad think? Dad doesn't even know I exist," I pointed out, my voice flat. Vance flinched. It was the ugly, unspoken truth. In the 3 years since I had been brought back, our father, the patriarch of the Stone conglomerate, had never been told about me. Vance and our mother had hidden my existence from him, claiming they were waiting for the perfect time to break the news so as not to cause a domestic crisis that might affect the company's stock prices or upset Wendy's fragile health. We were going to tell him," Vance muttered, his eyes darting away. "We just needed things to stabilize." "It's been 3 years, Vance," I said. "If you wanted to tell him, you would have. The truth is, you're ashamed of me. You're ashamed of my background, my manners, and the fact that I don't fit into your perfect, glossy world. You brought me back to satisfy your own conscience, but you kept me hidden so you wouldn't have to face the social consequences." "That's not true," Vance roared, his face flushing red. "It is true," I said, feeling a strange sense of pity for him. "But it doesn't matter anymore. I'm letting you off the hook. You don't have to worry about the shame, or the secrets, or Wendy's tantrums. I'm leaving. From now on, the Stone family only has one daughter. Her name is Wendy." I began to close the door. Vance shoved his hand against the wood, stopping it. His eyes were wide, a strange, desperate light in them. "Maya, wait. You can't just cut us off. Mom is sick with worry. She's been crying all morning." "If she's worried, she has my number," I said. "But tell her not to come here. I won't be here." "Maya, goodbye, Vance." I applied a firm, steady pressure to the door. Slowly, reluctantly, his hand slid off the wood. The door clicked shut, and I turned the deadbolt. Through the thick wood, I heard him stand there for a long time. His shadow blocked the light under the crack of the door. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, I heard his heavy, retreating footsteps echo down the corridor and fade away. I sat down on my suitcase, buried my face in my hands, and let out a long, shuddering sigh. For the first time in 3 years, I didn't cry. 3 days later, I moved into my new home. It was a small attic room in an old low-rise building located in one of the city's older, working-class districts. The plaster on the walls was peeling in places, and the plumbing made a clanking, groaning noise whenever I ran the hot water, but it had a large, arched window that faced the east. When I opened the window, I could smell the faint, yeasty scent of the bakery downstairs and hear the distant, comforting hum of the morning market. It was loud, chaotic, and utterly alive. It was the exact opposite of the sterile, silent suburb where I had spent the last 3 years waiting for a family that would never come. I spent the first day scrubbing the wooden floors and wiping down the windows until they shone. I unpacked my few belongings, placing my adoptive parents' worn, black and white photograph on the small wooden desk by the window. They were simple farmers who had spent their entire lives working the land, but they had loved me with a fierce, uncomplicated warmth. They had never hidden me. They had never asked me to wait in the shadows so someone else could shine. Looking at their smiling faces, I felt a deep, grounding sense of peace. On Friday afternoon, my phone rang again. This time it was my mother. I stared at the screen for several seconds before answering. "Hello, Mom." Maya. Her voice was frantic, trembling with a fragile, dramatic grief that I had once found deeply moving but now found exhausting. "Oh, thank God you answered. Vance told me everything." "Oh, my poor baby, what are you doing? How could you move out like that? Do you know how heartbroken I am?" "I'm fine, Mom," I said, my tone polite but entirely neutral. "I've settled into a new place. It's very quiet." "But why?" she sobbed. "Is it because of Wendy?" "Maya, you have to understand. Wendy is. She's very sensitive. She grew up believing she was our only daughter. When she found out about you, she had a panic attack so severe she had to be hospitalized. We have to be gentle with her. We can't just force you into her life." "I know," I said. "That's why I've stepped back. I'm not forcing myself into her life anymore. Or yours." There was a sudden, heavy silence on the other end of the line. My mother seemed to have been choked by her own words, unprepared for my lack of argument. What do you mean by that?" she whispered. "I mean I'm letting go," I said. "I spent 3 years waiting for a time when it would be convenient for you to be my mother. I realize now that that time will never come. And that's okay. You have Wendy. She needs you more than I do." "Maya, don't say that." My mother's voice turned sharp, tinged with a desperate defensiveness. "I love you. I gave you that card, didn't I? I came to see you whenever I could. How can you say I don't care about you? You came to see me on Tuesday afternoons for an hour, always checking your watch, terrified someone would see your car parked in my neighborhood," I said, my voice steady and clear. "You gave me a card because it was easier to throw money at your guilt than to look your husband in the eye and tell him the truth. I don't blame you, Mom. But I'm not going to play this game anymore." "I'm coming to see you," she declared suddenly. "Where are you?" "Give me the address. I'm getting in the car right now." "No," I said. "Don't come. I won't let you in." "Maya, I am your mother. My mother died 3 years ago in a small village hospital," I said, looking at the photograph on my desk. She was wearing a faded cotton apron and her hands were rough from working the fields, but she held my hand until her very last breath. She didn't hide me. Before my mother could respond, I quietly hung up the phone. I went into my settings, opened her contact profile, and tapped the button to block her number. Then I did the same to Vance. It was an incredibly simple action, just 2 taps of a finger, but the weight that lifted from my shoulders when it was done was immense. The digital silence that followed was beautiful. With the ties to the Stone family severed, I needed to secure a stable livelihood. My freelance translation work paid enough for rent and basic groceries, but it kept me isolated in my room, staring at a screen all day. I wanted to be out in the world, to feel the dirt under my fingernails again, to connect with something tangible. I found it in a small, dusty corner of the district, an antique book restoration workshop called The Chronicle. The shop was owned by an elderly man named Mr. Harrison, a quiet, weathered individual who spoke only when necessary. The shop smelled of aged paper, leather, glue, and dried lavender. It was a slow, meticulous world where damaged things were carefully taken apart, cleaned, mended, and put back together with patience and respect. When I first walked in asking for a job, Mr. Harrison had looked at my small, pale hands and asked, "Do you have the patience for this, young lady? Some books take months to heal." "I have nothing but time," I had replied. He hired me on a trial basis. I started with the simplest tasks, cleaning the dirt off old leather covers with soft brushes, sorting loose pages, and preparing the wheat starch paste used for mending. I loved it. The rhythmic, quiet nature of the work suited me perfectly. In the restoration of these forgotten, battered volumes, I found a reflection of my own journey. You didn't throw a book away just because its cover was torn or its spine was broken. You treated it with care, reinforced its weak points, and gave it a new lease on life. Weeks turned into months. My skin, which had been pale and sickly from 3 years of stress and isolation, gradually regained a healthy color. I gained weight, my body filling out to a healthy size. My 70-pound frame became a distant memory. I walked to the market every morning, bought fresh vegetables, chatted with the local vendors, and cooked simple, nourishing meals in my attic kitchen. I was, for the first time in my life, truly happy. Meanwhile, in the glittering high society world of the Stone family, my absence was beginning to create a strange, unseen pressure. For 3 years, Wendy's entire identity had been defined by her superiority over me. She had thrived on the knowledge that she was the preferred daughter, the one who got the expensive dresses, the public recognition, and the family's undivided devotion, while I was kept hidden in the shadows. My quiet compliance had been the canvas upon which she painted her grand, triumphant life. But now the canvas was gone. Initially, Wendy had been ecstatic. She had bragged to her friends about how she had won the game, how she had kept her brother by her side, and how the imposter had finally given up and retreated back to whatever hole she came from. But as the weeks passed, the victory began to taste like ash. There were no more tearful confrontations. There were no more desperate, pleading text messages for Vance to ignore. There was no more tragic, silent suffering for the family to feel guilty about. My complete and utter withdrawal had stripped Wendy of her target. Without me to look down upon, her tantrums lost their luster, and her victories felt hollow. She began to grow restless, her behavior becoming more erratic and demanding. "Vance, why isn't she calling you?" Wendy asked one evening, tossing her designer shopping bags onto the plush sofa of the Stone estate. She looked irritated, her brow furrowed as she glared at her brother, who was sitting at the mahogany desk in the study, staring blankly at a document. Vance didn't look up. "Who? You know who?" "Maya," Wendy snapped, crossing her arms. "It's been 2 months. She hasn't tried to contact Mom, she hasn't called you, and she didn't even wish me a happy birthday last week. Is she trying to make us look bad? Is she playing some kind of sick psychological game?" Vance finally raised his head. His eyes were bloodshot, surrounded by deep, dark circles. Over the past 2 months, he had tried to find me. He had gone to my old apartment, only to find it occupied by a young university student. He had contacted the landlord, but the man had refused to give him my new address, citing privacy laws. He had tried to track my bank transactions, only to find that the accounts linked to his family had been completely closed. I had vanished from his life as thoroughly as if I had never existed. "She's not playing a game, Wendy," Vance said, his voice unusually quiet, empty of its usual sharp authority. "She's just gone." "Well, good riddance," Wendy scoffed, though her voice trembled slightly with a strange, defensive anger. "But she still needs to return the things she took. What about the clothes? What about the money?" "She left the clothes," Vance said, his hand clenching into a fist on the desk. "She left every single thing I ever bought her. And she never touched a single cent of the card Mom gave her. Not 1 penny. Wendy froze, her eyes widening. "What? That's impossible. She was a peasant from the countryside. How could she not use the money?" Vance didn't answer. He turned his head, looking out the large French windows of the study at the sprawling, perfectly manicured gardens of the Stone estate. For 3 years, he had justified his treatment of me by telling himself that he was protecting the family, that he was keeping the peace, and that I was being taken care of financially. He had convinced himself that money could buy my patience, that a comfortable apartment could replace a family's love. But now, staring at the empty black card that sat in his desk drawer, the truth was staring back at him, cold and unyielding. I hadn't wanted their money. I had wanted them. And they had thrown me away. The autumn air grew crisp, turning the leaves of the city's ancient plane trees into shades of gold and amber. At the Chronicle, I was working on a particularly delicate project, a late 19th century ledger with a severely damaged spine and water-stained pages. It belonged to an old library, and its restoration required hours of painstaking, meticulous work. I was carefully applying Japanese tissue to mend a tear in one of the middle pages when the bell above the shop door chimed. I didn't look up immediately, completing the delicate press of the bone folder against the paper. "Welcome to the Chronicle. I'll be with you in just a moment. Maya." The voice was soft, hesitant, and laced with a deep, trembling emotion that made my hands freeze. I slowly raised my head. My mother was standing on the other side of the counter. She looked older than she had 2 months ago. The sharp, polished elegance of her high society appearance seemed slightly dimmed. She was wearing a simple, dark wool coat, her hair styled in a more subdued manner, and her eyes were red and swollen. Beside her stood Vance. He was dressed in a dark suit, his expression a mixture of relief, anxiety, and a strange, defensive pride that he couldn't quite shake. I looked at them. My heart gave a brief, familiar flutter of anxiety, but it was quickly replaced by a profound, cool stillness. The emotional storm they used to evoke in me had completely dried up. "How did you find me?" I asked, my voice calm, conversational. We hired an investigator," Vance said, taking a step forward. He looked around the dusty, paper-filled shop with a frown of disapproval. "Maya, what is this place? Why are you working here? It's dusty, it's cramped. Is this how you're living?" "I like it here," I said simply. I laid down my bone folder and picked up a clean cloth to wipe my hands. "I'm busy working. If you're not here to restore a book, I have to ask you to leave." "Maya, please." My mother stepped forward, her voice breaking as she reached across the counter to grasp my hand. I didn't flinch, but I gently, deliberately pulled my hand back out of her reach. Her hand hovered in the air for a second before dropping to her side, a look of profound hurt crossing her face. "Maya, my sweet girl, please don't be like this. We've been looking for you for weeks. We've been so worried. I haven't slept a full night since you left." "There was no need to worry," I said. "I am safe, healthy, and happy." "Happy?" Vance scoffed, his voice rising in that familiar, exasperated tone. "How can you be happy here? You're a stone, Maya. You belong in the main estate, not in some dusty basement cleaning old garbage." "I am not a stone, Vance," I said, looking him dead in the eye. "My name is Maya. Just Maya." "That's what we came to talk to you about," my mother said, wiping a tear from her cheek. She reached into her handbag and pulled out a thick, elegant folder, bearing the gold seal of the Stone family registry. "Look, Maya. We did it. Your father. We finally told him." I blinked, slightly surprised, but my expression remained neutral. "You told him?" "Yes." My mother nodded furiously, her eyes shining with a desperate, hopeful light. "We told him everything. He was angry at first, of course, but once he understood the situation, he agreed. He signed the papers. Your name, Maya. It's officially written in the family registry now. Look." She opened the folder and turned it toward me. There, on the thick, cream-colored parchment, printed in elegant calligraphy, was my name, Maya Stone. It was listed right beneath Vance's officially, recognizing me as the biological daughter of the Stone family. 3 years ago, this piece of paper would have been the greatest treasure of my life. I would have wept with joy, thrown myself into my mother's arms and thanked God for finally giving me a home. I would have tolerated any insult, accepted any amount of Wendy's bullying, just to see my name written on this page. But now, looking at the elegant letters, I felt absolutely nothing. It was just ink on paper, a belated, transactional attempt to quiet their own guilt and bring me back under their control, so they could stop feeling like the villains in their own story. "Thank you for showing me," I said, my voice entirely flat. My mother's smile faltered. "Maya, aren't you happy? You can come home now. The main estate is ready for you. We've prepared a beautiful room, right next to mine. You don't have to live in this terrible place anymore." "I have a home," I said, gesturing to the small attic above the shop. "And I don't want to move into the main estate." "Are you still throwing a fit about Wendy?" Vance asked, his patience clearly wearing thin. "She's agreed to it, Maya. We had a long talk with her. She understands now. She won't make trouble for you anymore." "I don't care about Wendy," I said, and for the first time it was the absolute truth. I don't hate her, and I don't want to compete with her. She can have the estate, the money, the family, and the attention. I don't want any of it. "But your name is on the registry." Vance pointed, his voice rising in frustration. "You are legally a daughter of the Stone family now. You can't just refuse to come home." "A registry doesn't make a family, Vance," I said, looking at him with a calm that seemed to unnerve him. "For 3 years, I lived in a small apartment, waiting for a call, waiting for a visit, waiting to be acknowledged. You had 36 months to write my name on that paper. You only did it now because I left, and your pride couldn't handle the fact that I didn't want you anymore." "Maya, please." My mother sobbed, her tears finally overflowing. "Don't punish us like this. We made mistakes, we know we did. But we're your family. You're real. Blood. Blood only makes us relatives," I said softly. "Love is what makes a family. And the only people who ever loved me without conditions are buried in a small cemetery in the countryside." I reached out, gently closed the folder, and pushed it back across the counter. To my mother. Take it back, I said. And please don't come here again. I have a book to finish. Maya. Vance took a step toward the counter, his face dark with anger and desperation. You are being incredibly selfish. Do you have any idea the scandal this will cause if people find out you rejected the family? Dad is hosting a grand banquet next month to celebrate the company's anniversary. He was planning to officially introduce you to high society. Then he can introduce Wendy, I said. She's much better suited for high society than I am. We won't let you do this, Vance threatened, though his voice lacked any real conviction. We will come back every day if we have to. If you do, I will call the police for harassment, I said, my voice cold and firm. And I will leave the city entirely. I've done it once. I can do it again. Vance choked on his words, his face turning pale. He stared at me, realizing for the first time that his threats, his money, and his authority no longer had any power over me. I had stripped myself of all desires regarding the Stone family, and in doing so, I had become entirely invincible to them. My mother looked at me, her eyes filled with a deep, hollow despair. She seemed to realize in that moment that she hadn't just lost a daughter today, she had lost her 3 years ago, through 1,000 small rejections and hidden promises. Let's go, Mom, Vance said, his voice raw. He grabbed our mother's arm, his eyes locked on me with a mixture of anger, hurt, and a profound lingering regret. My mother let out a quiet, broken sob as he led her toward the door. The bell chimed as they stepped out into the crisp autumn afternoon. I stood behind the counter for a long moment, listening to the silence of the shop. Then I picked up my bone folder, smoothed down the Japanese tissue on the damaged page of the 19th century ledger, and continued my work. My hands did not shake. The news of the Stone family's sudden, desperate search for their lost biological daughter eventually leaked to the public. In high society, secrets of that magnitude are impossible to keep forever, especially when a private investigator is hired, and when the patriarch of the family suddenly begins asking questions. The rumors spread like wildfire through the glittering salons and corporate offices of the city. Did you hear? The Stones had a biological daughter living in the countryside. All this time. I heard they kept her hidden in some suburb for 3 years because of Wendy. And now she refuses to come back? She rejected the family registry. The whispers were devastating to the Stone family's carefully cultivated image of perfect aristocratic harmony. To counter the rumors, my father, a man I had still never met, decided to proceed with the grand anniversary banquet. It was to be a massive, glittering affair at the city's grandest hotel, attended by the elite of the business, political, and social worlds. He believed that a public show of family unity, with both Wendy and myself standing by his side, would put an end to the gossip once and for all. 2 weeks before the banquet, a large, thick envelope arrived at the Chronicle. It was hand-delivered by a professional courier. Inside was a formal invitation to the Stone Group's 30th anniversary banquet, printed in gold ink on heavy cardstock. Along with the invitation was a handwritten note from my mother. Maya, please. Just this once. Your father wants to meet you. We want to show the world that you are our daughter. We bought you a beautiful dress. Please come home, even if it's just for one night. I beg of you. I stared at the invitation for a long time. My first instinct was to throw it in the trash. I had no desire to step foot in their world, to wear their expensive dresses, or to participate in their corporate public relations stunt. But then I looked at the photograph of my adoptive parents on my desk. I remembered how they had worked themselves to the bone to give me a decent life. I remembered how they had died with nothing but their dignity and their love for me. And I realized that as long as I kept running, as long as I kept hiding in this attic, the Stone family would always think of me as a victim. A pathetic, wounded girl who had run away because she couldn't handle the rejection. They needed to know, once and for all, that I hadn't run away. I had walked away. I picked up a pen and wrote a brief, polite RSVP. I will attend. The night of the banquet arrived, cold and clear. The Grand Hotel was surrounded by a sea of luxury cars and flashing cameras. Reporters and photographers lined the red carpet, desperate to catch a glimpse of the city's elite. Inside the grand ballroom, the atmosphere was suffocatingly opulent. Massive crystal chandeliers hung from the high ceilings, casting a warm, golden glow over the hundreds of guests dressed in tuxedos and designer gowns. I arrived in a taxi. I wasn't wearing the dress my mother had bought me. It had been delivered to my shop, but I had returned it unopened. Instead, I wore a simple, elegant black velvet dress that I had purchased myself from a local boutique. It had no designer label, no glittering diamonds, but it fit me perfectly, draping elegantly over my healthy, restored frame. My hair was styled in a simple, classic bun, exposing the clean, graceful lines of my neck and collarbone. I walked into the ballroom alone, my head held high, my posture relaxed. As I entered, a hush seemed to ripple through the nearest crowd. People turned to look at me. In a room filled with over-the-top luxury, my quiet, unadorned elegance was striking. I looked healthy, composed, and entirely at ease. A stark contrast to the rumors of a starving, traumatized peasant girl that had been circulating through the city. From across the room, I spotted the Stone family. They were standing on a raised platform, surrounded by a group of wealthy business associates. My father, Mr. Stone, was a tall, imposing man with sharp gray eyes and a stern, aristocratic bearing. Beside him stood my mother, looking incredibly anxious, her eyes darting nervously toward the entrance. Vance stood slightly behind them, looking stiff and uncomfortable. And then there was Wendy. She was wearing a magnificent, custom-made white gown covered in thousands of tiny Swarovski crystals. She looked like a princess, but her face was pale, and her eyes were dark with a mixture of anger, fear, and insecurity. She was clinging to Vance's arm as if he were a lifeline, her eyes scanning the room like a hunted animal. The moment my mother saw me, her eyes lit up with a mixture of relief and intense emotion. She whispered something to my father, who immediately turned his sharp gaze toward me. The family began to make their way through the crowd toward me. As they approached, the surrounding guests fell silent, parting to let them pass. Everyone was watching, eager to witness the dramatic reunion of the lost Stone daughter. My father was the first to reach me. He looked at me for a long moment, his eyes scanning my face, searching for a family resemblance. "Maya," he said, his voice deep, booming, and filled with a practiced paternal warmth. "I am your father. It is good to finally meet you." He reached out, expecting me to bow or perhaps offer a tearful embrace, but I simply offered him a polite, formal nod. "Good evening, Mr. Stone," I said. My father's eyebrows twitched slightly at the formal address, but he quickly smoothed his expression. "You look beautiful, my child. I am glad you decided to join us tonight. It is time you took your rightful place by our side." "I am here to return something," I said quietly, my voice carrying clearly in the quiet ballroom. My mother's breath hitched. "Maya, what do you mean?" I reached into my small velvet clutch and pulled out a document. It was a formal, legally binding declaration of renunciation, drawn up and signed by a lawyer I had hired using my own savings. "This is a formal renunciation of any claim to the Stone family estate, assets, and name," I said, holding the paper out to my father. "I have also signed a petition to have my name permanently removed from the family registry." A collective gasp echoed through the surrounding crowd. My father's face turned from polite warmth to a deep, thundering purple. "What is the meaning of this? Do you have any idea what you are doing? The scandal." "There is no scandal, Mr. Stone," I said, my voice steady, clear, and completely devoid of anger. "A scandal only exists if there is a conflict. I am not fighting you. I am simply letting you know that I am not your daughter. I never was." "Maya, please." My mother sobbed, reaching out to grab my arm, but Vance held her back, his own face pale and filled with a profound, silent despair. "You spent 3 years keeping me in the dark to protect your family's image," I said, looking at my mother, then at Vance, and finally at Wendy, who was staring at me with wide, horrified eyes. "You told me to wait. You told me to be patient. You told me to understand. And I did. I understood that your love was conditional, that your pride was more important than my existence, and that my presence was nothing but an embarrassment to you." I turned my gaze back to my father. "I don't need your registry, Mr. Stone. I don't need your money, your social status, or your approval. I have built a life of my own, with my own hands, and it is a life that I am proud of." I placed the document in my father's limp, motionless hand. "Tonight, I am officially returning your name. I am Maya, just Maya, and I am finally going home." I offered them one last, polite nod of farewell. Then, I turned around and began to walk toward the exit. "Maya, Maya, wait." Vance's voice echoed through the grand ballroom, filled with a raw, desperate agony that I had never heard from him before. He took a step to follow me, but the crowd was dense, and he was quickly swarmed by reporters and photographers, who had witnessed the entire exchange and were now shouting questions. "Mr. Stone, is it true your daughter has renounced the family? Did you keep her hidden for 3 years? Miss Stone, how do you feel about your sister's departure?" The flashing lights of the cameras erupted behind me, casting long, dancing shadows across the polished floor. I didn't look back. I walked out of the Grand Hotel, past the red carpet, and out into the cool, crisp night air. The city lights stretched out before me, bright, beautiful, and full of endless possibilities. I took a deep, clear breath, feeling the cool air fill my lungs, and smiled. I was finally home.